Okay, guys, so we are back now. We've been away for about a month, mainly because I've been moving house, so you can see his different background. So today we're going to get back to our platformer game, I think. We're going to see what we have left. I think we were working on our animations when we started it in the first episode. Well, I think we fixed or we made all of our animations. Now we just need to go and make them work whenever we want them to work, if that makes sense. So when we move the player in like a forward direction, we want the player to be running or walking, depending on the speed the player is going. And then when the player is either jumping or going up a ladder, we want it to play the corresponding animation. So we're going to start working on that today. We won't do all of them because that will take a while. We are going to start, first of all, by actually making our player move. So we're going to add a player into our scene, which I don't think we've actually got yet. Actually, yes, we do have a player in our scene. So we're going to get our player to start moving along a platform that we'll put in as a temporary base for our player to stand on, because we'll have to add a rigid body, and that comes with gravity and all of those things. So we'll do that in today's video, and then we'll see how far we get with that. We'll probably only start with the walking or the running animation, depending on what it is actually called. But then after that, we will, in the next few episodes, actually I think we're going to do it differently. What we'll do is we'll start with the animations that we need. So at the start, we will now in this episode go and do the running or the walking one, whatever it's called. And then later on, when we start working on different levels in one level, so when we have to use a ladder and when we actually have to jump over objects, we'll go and implement those. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck here on working on animations for a while. So let's get started. So we are exactly where we left off in the previous episode. I haven't touched anything. We have all of these animations that we did. We did our rolling animation, our climbing, our dying animation, our jumping, and our running. So in today's video, we're going to work on our running animation. So in our scene over here, we need to get this player, which is here, this guy over here. We need to actually get this player to start walking, because when we go and play the game, nothing happens. You can see there's just plays an idle animation, which is what we wanted to do. But now when we use our arrow keys or A, W, S, and D keys to make our player start moving, we want to play the corresponding animation. In this case, it's going to be our running animation. So let's go and start by giving our player some movement. So we're going to need a player class for this. So let's create a new script. So in our scripts folder, we can just create a new player script. Then we can drag this onto it when it loads. So in here, we're just going to do something very simple just for now. It's probably not going to be the final way we move our player. But where is our script? Did that not open? Here it is. Okay, so in here, this is where we're going to handle everything to do with, well, most things to do with our player. So we are going to need to move our player. So let's create a move method. And then in there, we are going to use this to move our player. So before we do that, I'm going to create another script, and this is going to be a global script. So this is going to house just static variables that we need to access around the entire game. So let's create a global script. Otherwise, if we don't do this, then it's going to be kind of hard to change the speed of the player's movement. And then I don't know if we're going to have a score in this game, but if we have a score in this game, we can go and put that in here as well. So let's create a public. Everything in here is going to be public, just so we can access it from any script in the game. So this is going to be public static. It's going to be an int, and this is going to be our speed. And we'll set that to 5 for now. And then we will go back to our player, and then now we need to do something in our move. So let's go and delete our start method just because we don't need it for now. And then in our move method here, we need to go and tell our player to move whenever our player, or whenever the controller, which is the person playing it, in this case it's going to be me and you if you're making this game. So whenever we press one of the arrow keys, we want the player to move in that direction. So we need to get the horizontal movement. So this is going to be, let's say, what are we going to make it? We're going to make it, it's going to have to be a float, I think. So let's go ahead and make a direction. So this is going to be a float direction along the x-axis. And then we will set that as soon as we press one of our arrow keys. So as soon as we go and interact with one of our keys, we need to go and update this direction variable in to represent the correct direction, the direction that we are moving in. So let's go and say direction x is going to be equal to input, what is it? It's going to be input dot get axis, yeah, and that's going to be our horizontal input. And then what we can do is we can go and times that by our global dot speed, because that will give us our movement for our player. So now we just need to go and assign this to our player, if that makes sense. So let's go and say rigid. No, we need to add a rigid body onto our player first, otherwise we're not going to be able to move it. So on our player, let's go and create a rigid body. So we'll add a rigid body. It's going to be a 2D one because we are obviously making a 2D game. Now, because this now adds gravity onto our player, I'm just going to add a 2D object, and this is going to be just a sprite for now. This is just going to act as our floor so that we can not fall out of our scene. So here we'll add that onto there, and then we can go and add a box collider onto it. So that should now wrap around our entire collider or entire box, which it does. And now if we play the game, not that our, okay, we need to add a collider onto our player. Now I can never remember which one it is. I think it's going to be a polygon. Yes, it is. So that's going to wrap around our player nicely. So let's play that and see if that works. Okay, cool. So now that's fine. Now we need to go and freeze a few things. So on our, where is it, a rigid body, we have a few constraints here. So we don't want to rotate in the Y and the Z direction. And we don't want to freeze on the X and the Y position because that's the only direction we're going to be moving. You're going to be moving up and down. So let's go play that and see if that makes any difference. Okay, so that's fine. Now you can see our player is now standing on the floor, which later on we will actually delete that and then put in proper platforms that we're going to use from this asset pack. So I'll get rid of this entire square. Well, it's now a rectangle, but we'll get rid of that eventually. And now we can go and finish working on our move method. So this we don't actually call. So let's go and call our move method here. And that should be fine. So now we need to go and add this direction onto our player's velocity. So that we can do by accessing our rigid body. So we can do this by saying serialized field, that needs to be in brackets. This is going to be a rigid body 2D, and then we'll just call it rigid body like that, just short, nice and quick. So now we can go and say rigid body dot velocity is going to be equal to new vector 2, and we want this to be in the X direction, I think. So let's go and say direction X for our X parameter, and then we want the Y velocity to stay the same, so we can just go and set it at what it is. So rigid body dot velocity dot Y like that. So that's going to make it stay what it currently is, which should be 0, but you never know. Let's go and test this out and see if it actually works. So we can play the game. So now if we use our, okay, so we have not assigned our, I assume that's our rigid body. So let's see, where is our player script here? Okay, so we can drag this into there, and then that should now let us play the game. Okay, so now if we move our player up and down, you can see that we have some movement. Now, what we need to work on in today's episode, which is what we were going to work on, is our animation. So whenever we're going to add I think it's a condition or a parameter to our animation, our running animation. I'm going to say whenever our velocity is greater than 0, we need to go and play this animation. And when it is less than or when it is equal to 0, then we need to play our idle animation. So let's go and try and do that. So our animator is over here. Now, when we make a transition from idle to run, we need to add a condition. So here we have parameters that we made, and we set this as a float, I believe. So now we can go and set this is running parameter to our velocity, and that will check whenever our is running is greater than 0, it will then transition from the idle state into our running state. And then when it is less than 0, it should automatically transition back to idle. So let's go and do that. So in our move method here, we can go and access our animator, but we need to do that by, let's see, do we have it on our player already? We should do. Yeah, so we have an animator attached to our player, so we can go and let's just copy this just to save some time, and then we'll just change this to animator, and then this will just be animator. I can't spell animator. Okay, so that's fine. So now we can go and say in our move method, we can go and say animator dot set float. Now this needs to be exactly the same as what we had it here. So this is going to be is running. So just to keep this the same, I'm going to create some read only in our global script, and these are going to be public static read only string is running, and that is going to be equal to the exact same thing, is running. So I believe that is a small letter I. Yes, it is. So a small letter I and capital letter R. So that's fine. So let's go and test this out. So in here we can go and say global dot is running. Dot is running. There we go. And then in here we can just go and set our direction of X. So that should be fine. So let's give that a test and see if it works. Watch it not going to work. In fact, yes. Oh, okay. Obviously it doesn't work because we haven't attached our animator. We always do that. Okay, so let's go drag our animator into there. And now, the moment of truth, it should now work. So if we move from left to right, you can see that our animator does register that our velocity is greater than 0, but it's not moving back. So what we need to do is, I believe we need to go and set it back to idle. Do we? Let's see. I don't think so. I think it should automatically do that by itself. So let's go back to our animator and see our idle. Idle is greater than 0, yeah. So it should transition to running when it is greater than 0, and it should automatically, I assume, transition back to idle when it's less than 0. So let's see. Let's just test this again and see if anything different happens. So we can't really see our velocity, can we? Can we see it on our rigid body? No, we can't. But it does work. When we stop moving left or right, it moves nicely. So we need to go and set this back to 0, I believe. But before we do that, let's fix something quickly. So when we go and play the game and we move our character from left to right, we want it to face the correct direction. Now you can see we don't want our player to be looking like he's walking backwards whenever we press the left arrow key. So to do that, we can go and flip the player along the axis that it is moving along. So we can create the same way we did to our move method. We can create a flip player method. We'll put that straight under here. This is going to be flip player. There we go. Okay, so now in our flip player method, we can go and say, because we have a rigid body attached to our player, we can go and say if the rigid body dot velocity is greater than, I think it's minus 0.1, then why is that not working? Velocity dot x, I believe. There we go. That should be, we need to flip the sprite. So let's see, on our player, we have a sprite renderer. So we need to access that. So the same way we did to our rigid body and our animator, this is just going to be a sprite renderer. Let's just copy that and then paste it, save some time. So this is going to be sprite renderer dot flip x. And that's going to be equal to true. And then the same thing if it is greater than. So here we can go and copy this and say if it is greater than, or if it's less than, no, sorry, if x, if the velocity of x is less than minus 0.1, in other words, if you're going backwards, then we need to go and flip it. And if it is greater than 0, then we need to go and say this equal to false, because we don't want to look backwards. We want to look in the right direction, if that makes sense. So let's go test that out and see if that actually works. So this should work. Now we should be able to move forward, and of course we haven't assigned it, so it's not going to work. So on our player, we need to drag in our sprite renderer just into there, and that should give us access to flipping our sprite renderer. So if we move in the right direction, it faces right, and if we move in the left direction, it faces left. So that's good. Whichever key you press, it will face in that direction. That's perfect. Now we need to fix that animation, because that is not what we want. So let me just see, in our previous game, did we do that in there? Move player? No. Let's go and test this out quick. If we go back to our animator, let's just create a transition back to our idle, and then in here we can go and say doesn't have an exit time, set that to 0. And then we can go and say condition is running is it needs to be, what is going to be? That's not going to work because, hold on, let's see, is greater than 0. And no, that's not going to work because we can't really do that. So I am going to go back and see. It is a very simple fix. I just can't remember how to do it because I haven't really touched any game development in the last month since I released the previous episode. So I'm going to go back and fix that, or figure out how to fix it, and I'll come back in the next episode for this game and we will do that. And then we'll also start working on a very simple level so that we can get different elements of the game working, like jumping over different obstacles, and also just setting up, well, looking at what it's like to set up a proper 2D platformer game. But yeah, I don't know when that next episode is going to come out. We're not going to be as frequent as I was before I took this break until probably September. So I think at the beginning of September I will start releasing one every weekday. But for now, you just have to bear with me until I release a new one. But yeah, thanks for watching if you are still here. And also, if you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to the 200 subscriber mark. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the content, and I will be with you shortly. But enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye.